I think it's a shame how, as readers or viewers, we can often give up on a manga or anime simply due to the first few episodes. Though, if we did that for every piece of media we consumed, we could be missing out on a completely immersive world and journey ahead of us. Dungeon Meshi, in my opinion, could probably fall under this umbrella. We may hear about how great the story gets, but when taking the initiative to finally read it, we may lose interest. This is probably due to a rather quirky introduction, which I think feels smoother in the anime compared to the manga. A work that truly hides its treasures well, much like a real dungeon in an MMO. Dungeon Meshi was a manga I wanted to read and experience, but the initial hook fell short of my expectation. This led to procrastinating the first few chapters, and I didn't really notice the actual greatness that was lurking within. Food Wars is the only anime with a focus on food that I have actually watched and enjoyed, despite its ecchi nature, and that was purely by accident. It had a decent story about the passion of food, experimentation, competition, and the art was nothing short of impressive. Fast forward to today, now we've got this new form of narrative that explores the idea of creating and enjoying food, but packaged in a magnificent web of lore and character development. This D&D/MMO hybrid mix of concepts really laid the foundation for some magical sorcery to occur. And no, it wasn't just masterly. The magic I'm referring to is the dungeon, and of course our main cast of characters. But why is the dungeon so important for the plot to even progress at all? If not for the dungeon, there would be no reason for their initial mission of saving Farlan. But to give further insight, it also allowed us to form a connection with this mystical world that the author has conjured. We have our side quest, so to speak, of making a dish that can provide the party energy and replenish their mana and health. Though through this seemingly basic task, we actually get to learn about the monsters themselves, their habitats, their tastes, and even some secrets the party need to discover in order to overcome a hurdle. It's fascinating how these small actions of crafting a recipe and putting it all together can give so much personality to each character, and also help to showcase their backstories, their feelings, and much more. To think that something so simple can actually impact the trajectory of the plot so much. When you think about it, even in a real-life context, food is something that can actually bring us together and gets us to share more about ourselves. Special events, home-cooked meals, getting together with old friends or colleagues, it provides a space to connect over a hopefully good meal. This is where memories are formed, and thus connects us with people, places, or distinct things such as how delicious a dish is or what it's made of, all while the conditions around us also heavily influence this experience. The season, location, and even its expense. As seen in the manga, adventurers that do enter the dungeon typically bring in foods that have a longer shelf life and are rather generic and mundane. Hence, much of the experience lacks the same quality and excitement a freshly made meal has on both recovery and satisfaction. Let alone the end result came from their own hard efforts, labor, and didn't require funds to prepare. This made each episode feel unique, compelling, utilizing existing ingredients that had been left over or conserved, all while restricted to the dungeon, which, as we discover, offers an abundance of choice and category. Though on my first few chapters, I didn't quite understand the logic of the recipe-style format, honestly. How silly of me. Dungeon Meshi basically offers a new meal for each chapter, a new flavor, a new item, and whilst doing so we venture further and further into the dungeon, having learned so much about our characters. Even small details really make the cast feel more believable, well-rounded, and lovable. It's almost as if the stages of the dungeon itself were the layers of backstory and context being revealed about the party. We still have much to learn, but the further we venture, the the more secrets are exposed or memories told. It's actually quite fascinating how well the concept of simply cooking meals can facilitate the progression of our party through the dungeon so seamlessly, taking into account the ecosystem it is governed by, which could have easily been overshadowed if not for the way Rokokuri introduced every creature and element through natural encounters in the environment with the cast themselves. Imagine having followed the story of the typical party that ventured with regular food rations and fought monsters in a more traditional narrative. Of course, this story would have developed its own strengths and weaknesses and had its own agenda for how the plot would progress, though logically it would be hard to achieve the world building and effort that was built through the introduction of a more foreign concept. Eating monsters, interacting with the environment, because this is simply how they could survive in such a dire situation. It's why I love Senshi for his quirky yet knowledgeable comedic presence, and Leos for his genuine excitement and interest in trying new things. Of course, this isn't the entire plotline. On the surface, it can appear like a completely food-centric manga or anime, but below that initial mirage, we see so much more. It's like digging for small pieces of gold nuggets until you get a whole collection of unique shapes and sizes, worth way more than their appearance. Then they're finally crafted into something with purpose and artistry. I feel like the author really builds this up gradually, through our initial quest of searching for Farlan, to engaging with the paintings on the wall, and even the introduction of Master Lee's forbidden dark magic. The hints are spread throughout the story as we interact with new characters, learn about the secrets of the dungeon and the sorceress who controls it, and the magic this is all governed by. When we think about the former basic introduction to the world of Dungeon Meshi, I can see why its concept may deter people from giving it a read, simply because it doesn't have a huge hook like many other stories do through their synopsis. I still find myself contemplating why I love this style of storytelling so much, and I suppose it could simply be the depth of the world that's been created. Maybe it could be the range of characters that all seem to embody their own sense of purpose or motive, with a personality that doesn't feel forced, yet retaining that imaginative quality that makes manga. While its infamous rival Frieren offers a more reminiscent and slower-paced high fantasy journey, Meshi keeps us engaged through its comedic moments with dashes of drama and action incorporated. I think this does an amazing job with creating a livable, breathable world. I'm just going to warn you guys that everything past this point will contain spoilers. If you haven't watched the show or read the manga yet, please do so before moving forward. Every interaction with a monster and every recipe that is crafted holds a purpose. It allows them to learn about their surroundings and hence prepares them for events to come. Whilst they may not know what stands ahead of them, as a viewer, we don't either. It's a mix of events that mash up into a fine sequence, steadily building up pace, keeping momentum until the very end. Though, upon picking up the manga, we expected a light-hearted series. This is later used to its advantage, throwing us off guard and into the fire, with flames so wild, dark and great that it's hard not to succumb to the sheer greatness of it all. There is so much to learn, so much to gain, even if it's just to admire the character design, the world design, or the build-up of a great narrative. Food isn't just a temporary buffer or insert, it's a constant theme that continues through each episode, and actually maintains the plot and serves a valid purpose. Leos and Farlan are both obsessed with monsters, and insert Senshi, we've got a combination that delivers something unordinary, weird, but also natural. As these strange concepts morph toward the ending, mixed in with the demon's strong appetite alongside its thirst for the desires of the living, everything starts to make sense. And when we realize this, it's hard not to appreciate just how clever the whole concept is. A straightforward logic, but done in an artistically abstract way. The moral of the story truly becomes an amalgamation of appreciating appreciating life, accepting the instability of its nature and the unexpected trials that come with it. To live life with passion, but not letting your desires entangle you so much that you lose sight of what's important, losing yourself in the process, which is, obviously, to eat a balanced diet, rethink your lifestyle rhythms, and get your proper exercise. Just kidding. It touches on themes of acceptance, belonging, mortality, maintaining balance, and the human condition in general. Even the idea of preservation, the environment, and food are present throughout. Some stories end on a bittersweet note, or aren't that satisfactory. Maybe they venture too far ahead in the future, or end things too abruptly. Dungeon Meshi felt like an appropriate ending to me. It's quite rare that I find myself feeling completely content with the ending, and that's just a personal flaw of mine. I accept whatever it is, of course. Though Meshi doesn't rush its ending, it tries to give everyone a chance to explain themselves. I actually like that there is some vagueness to their future, because this gives the reader a chance to become imaginative and not stuck in one linear direction. Of course, we know how Laos is the king of the land, but there's still room to speculate what other aspects of his life would change, like what exactly ends up happening with Marseille. We all remember the succubus chapters, right? I can't be the only one speculating this. To summarize, it felt like a nice and simple ending that matched the general theme of the entire story. Without going into too much detail, the designs of the characters and the world are done exceptionally well. If we look at the details of everything that makes up the environment, the interior scenes, the small details of each object or item, this adds so much weight to the overall immersion and believability. It's not easy for an artist to be so well-rounded in creating the entire manga. Backgrounds are tough, especially when it comes to something fantasy, where much of the concepts need a lot of imagination alongside reference to create. I can't even imagine the amount of time she would have spent to designing each zone, level, and the unique elements that they contained. Obviously, her knowledge of D&D and games like Baldur's Gate probably gave her a lot of fuel to stimulate the creative process of her own world. Having that knowledge and library definitely paid dividends in many areas, like the races, sizes, and differentiation between characters. Here we've got silhouettes that feel unique and identifiable, which makes their style so distinct in the anime manga space, as many people have commented on. They enjoy the art style, the character traits that define them, and it's so empowering to see her switch up their designs almost effortlessly into other races, like when they transformed due to the changeling mushrooms. Not only do the characters still feel recognizable, keeping their distinguished characteristics, but she also does a great job in contributing to the storytelling details, such as their armor or equipment, its functionality and purpose for their class, and so much more. That, together with her understanding of writing and psychology, have made these characters so much more real, relatable, and a breath of fresh air. It actually reminds me of how Square did this with Final Fantasy IX, which was also peak design. They had varying shapes, sizes, and traits, but they still felt like they inhabited the same world. Rokokui really studies hard and loves art. You can truly see this with everything she does and produces. The art books of her sketches also gives us a look into her experimentation with each character, exploring the possibilities, and just having fun. It's a beautiful thing to witness from a creative point of view. Needless to say, I'm a big fan of this art style. None of the art would actually make any sense or shine if it weren't for the outline behind the character's initial concept. Somehow, despite having a large cast of characters, they each feel different and inhabit their own sets of abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. A character cannot become memorable without an actual reason or purpose for their function in the story. Our core cast of characters are all key assets, that if you removed one of them, the whole Jenga tower would collapse in on itself. They each help each other tackle the other's weakness, and vice versa. And I think this dynamic allows for a smooth story to be told. Beyond the main cast, the other groups that become involved in the greater scheme of things also feel important, and in my personal opinion, don't take up unnecessary weight from the main lineup. They simply add and facilitate the progress, rather than being a burden of more characters for filler reasons. The Carnaries were important and vital to pushing the boundaries for Marseille to take her unfortunate actions, and they served in creating drama around the dungeon's future involving the entire continent or island. Speaking of the main cast, as I already established, our main characters are a mix of different personalities that complement each other and divide roles and tasks in a balanced way. Leos being the warrior, who's a mix between a tank and DPS, Marcial, the black mage who deals heavy explosive damage but is posing as a healer, Chiljak is the thief rogue who manages their safety through navigating around traps or obscure obstacles, Senshi the chef who still provides some DPS due to his dwarven strength, and then we've got Izutsumi who is quite agile and quick with her paws, a beastkin delivering powerful physical damage to her foes. Their distinct personalities all intertwine, making the journey to the end a very comical and worthwhile endeavor. It's been a hell of an experience, where I may have felt frustrated with Izutsumi's lack of regard sometimes, but overall I found my time with them quite endearing. It's definitely a story that will stick with me, spiritually, because I know as much as I love this story, I'll forget it, because that's just how my brain works. I will miss reading this, but I'm also glad I finally got to the end. It's been 10 or so years in the making, and the hard work definitely paid off in more ways than one. I'd call Dungeon Meshi a success in multiple aspects. This adventure would entice those seeking a new taste or flavor, but I'm sure the Izutsumis and Marcials of the world will also appreciate the finer details of this marvelous world. Can you imagine what our next story will be?